Friends, you'll never believe it that one of the first awards that I ever received was in the AOH Hall in Foyle Street in my home street of Derry.
Wow.
I was reciting poetry in Irish at Fish Derry Column. I was only 13 years old. Obviously, my aunt Vrogulas and Hain, I was very proud of myself. But I could never have imagined that I'd be here tonight in Omaha, 4,000 miles from Derry, to receive the John F. Kennedy Medal. Thank you so much. It's more an honour to be shot in Lanera, but it's going to wait us free. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your kindness. Coincidentally, the poem that I recited at the Derry Fish all those years ago was entitled An Shop Alar and Lana by Sean McOrish. It's set in the penal times in Ireland when a priest was celebrating Mass in secret down Alar and Lana in the middle of the glen. And suddenly they heard the sound of horses' hooves approaching. They knew it was the red-coat soldiers of the English king. And quickly an old man, Brian O'Leigh, stepped forward to save the priest. "You're young, Father Sean," he said, "and I'm at the end of my life, so change clothes with me now and shop Alar and Lana." And they hung Brian O'Leigh on a tall, high tree, there in the middle of the glen. He was a martyr for Christ. Father Sean escaped to continue his vital ministry of celebrating the holy sacrifice of the Mass. I remember as a young boy being deeply moved by that poem. It was perhaps the first time that I understood the reality of the persecution of my religion and tradition in Ireland. And perhaps that's why it was so special for me last year to visit Old St. Patrick's in New York, and to learn how members of your order stood in solidarity to protect their spiritual home from attack. And earlier this week I was able to visit Old St. Patrick's in Chicago, and I knelt down and thanked God there for the witness of the ancient order of Hibernians and the ladies' ancient order of Hibernians. 2,500 years ago, when God's people were in harsh and lonely exile in Babylon, the prophet Isaiah encouraged them, "Remember the rock from which you were hewn, the quarry from which you were dug." And tonight here in Omaha, I want to thank you for doing just that, for sustaining the link between the Hibernians and your Catholic faith. Sadly, many organisations in recent decades have chosen to distance themselves from their Catholic roots. Some, of course, were reacting to the horrific sins and crimes of abuse that betrayed that sacred trust of their church. Others were swept along by the tide of secularism, which has opposed Catholic Church positions on, say, the protection of life or the uniqueness of marriage, and our solidarity with the poor and the marginalised, including migrants and refugees. For various reasons then, some Catholics have preferred to forget the rock from which they were hewn. But my friends in the AOH and AOH, you retain your Catholic faith as a unique selling point. You see the faith of our mothers and fathers as a precious treasure, handed down in spite of dungeon, fire and sword. You see your Catholic faith as something worth sharing, because it's not only good for yourselves and your families personally, spiritually and emotionally and mentally, but it's also good for the world. To treasure one's faith and culture, language, sport and music, to nourish your traditions and your heritage. This is not some kind of nostalgia or comfort blanket. It is rather to protect a pearl of great price, our identity, our family story, our connections with others, to protect them from the kind of bland monoculture, particularly on social media, which tends nowadays to erase the diversity and richness of culture that makes our world the beautiful and colourful place that it is. Over these past few days, dear Hibernians, I've learned a lot from you about the importance of valuing faith and culture, friendship, unity, and Christian charity. You're well aware, of course, that Ireland has been changing rapidly, like so many other countries. Ireland is now a multicultural home to many newcomers, with all of the challenges and opportunities that can bring. In the north, for example, our health services, our hospitality and catering services, our agri-food and manufacturing sectors are now highly dependent on the new Irish. A far cry from the days when they used to joke about Sammy walking down the Shankill Road and challenging a stranger, "Are you a Catholic or a Protestant?" And the stranger replying, "Actually, I'm a Jew." And Sammy retorts, "Yeah, but are you a Catholic Jew or a Protestant?" Last Sunday in Drogheda, I celebrated Mass with 650 Catholics of all ages from Kerala in India, and it was a vibrant, prayerful and uplifting occasion. At the other end of our diocese in Dungannon in County Tyrone, our Catholic schools would risk closure if it wasn't for the presence of our new neighbours and parishioners from East Timor and Eastern Europe and beyond. We're no longer dealing with a binary, simplistic scenario of two communities and traditions, orange and green. And we need to factor this new reality into our discussions about Irish unity, lasting peace and prosperity. Last year, there were approximately 3 times more race hate incidents and crimes in the north than sectarian hate incidents and crimes, even though these too continue to cause us great concern. And that is why, as I said yesterday, as shepherd of my flock, and alongside my fellow Christian church leaders of other traditions, I'm trying my best to promote mutual understanding and reconciliation, and to raise awareness of the negative othering of people, which only serves to divide us. I know that many people looking in at Ireland from the outside see a history of division within the Christian family, of sectarianism, intolerance, and sometimes open hostility. This is a source of scandal, and it has dimmed the light of the gospel. The churches on the island of Ireland have publicly acknowledged and lamented together the times when we have failed to bring to a fearful and divided society that message of the deeper connection that binds us despite our different identities as children of God. Meaningful work of reconciliation and building community cohesion in Ireland is the unfinished work of peace. And we must support it and resource it alongside and especially after the forthcoming border poll. Similarly, we must sustain our reflections on the legacy of conflict, which continues to drive much of the sectarianism and lack of progress that we see today. The Good Friday Agreement was not simply about the cessation of hostilities, the silencing of the bomb or the bullet. It spoke clearly of a peaceful society through a restoration of relationships. In my view, it's compulsory then for Christians of all traditions to keep building bridges between our different communities, and similarly with our newcomer cultures and traditions on the island of Ireland. Doing so doesn't in any way mean losing our own faith, culture, language, sport, music and dance. In fact, the exact opposite. For in remembering the rock from which we were hewn and the quarry from which we were dug, we nourish the self-esteem that's necessary for us to confidently approach our sisters and brothers of other cultures, faiths and traditions, and to say, let us combine our efforts so that we can build an Ireland which is the very best place to rear our children and grandchildren side by side. As the Deputy Ambassador said, Níneart go Curly Kina. Aharja, I thank you once more for this prestigious award, and may God bless the AOH and the LAOH for many more years to come. God bless you.